let's start. So what I've planned for this session is I thought we will start with the division algorithm and move right up to Euclid's algorithm. That is the algorithm to find the greatest common divisor of two integers. You all are familiar with both of these, but we'll just go over these ideas. This is part of your syllabus, but since you all have already covered it, let's not waste too much of time on it. Okay. So starting with the division algorithm, what is the division algorithm? So what does the division algorithm tell us? I have stated the most basic version of the division algorithm here. Your notes has a more precise theorem, a more, I won't say precise, a more general version of this theorem. I purposely stated the basic version because the idea of the proof all comes from here. You can look at the proof of the other theorem, the more general theorem, but the idea of the proof is all here. Okay, so what is division algorithm? So division algorithm is, if you give me two integers, say a and b, okay, two natural numbers, we are considering natural numbers, this can be done for integers also, where b is positive. So if you give me two natural numbers, it says that I can write a as some bq plus r, where r lies between 0 and b. And this method of writing a as bq plus r is unique. That is, you can't get some other integer, or in other words, if a is equal to b times q1 plus r, r1, and a is also equal to b times q2 plus r2, where r1 and r2 lie between 0 and b, then r1 will have to be equal to r2 and q1 will have to be equal to q2. This is what division algorithm is. Okay, so you can find these unique integers. So where does the intuition of this come from? So if you give me any integer, it is kind of like subtracting. Take an integer a and keep subtracting b from it. Suppose a is greater than b. Okay, let's just consider that case. If a is greater than b, this is not greater than, it is greater than. It's behaving a little badly. Okay, so if a is greater than b, the idea is you keep subtracting b from it. Okay, so that's how you get the remainder. You keep subtracting b from it. So if you subtract b from a, you will get a minus b. If you subtract another b from this, you will get a minus 2b. And you keep doing that till your number becomes less than b. Okay, you keep doing that. So try to imagine what will happen. You have a, and from that you are continuously subtracting b till your a minus, say, let's say qb is less than b. Now here, the first time it happens, okay, this will be a positive number the first time it happens. If you do it once more, it will become a negative number. Okay, this number will be your remainder, what is left over. Okay, so this is the basic intuition of division algorithm. Now for the proof of division algorithm, we do exactly what you would expect. Okay, I will assume that you are familiar with I will assume that you are familiar with the well ordering principle that states that given any non-empty subset of natural numbers, it always has a least element. So let us consider this set, exactly that same set, by continuous subtraction of a by b. So let S be the set a minus bq such that A minus BQ is okay, let us just take this and look at cases here. Okay, so such that Q is in this case n union 0 is none. Okay, in the general case this will not be sufficient. Okay, so we are looking at all these A minus B Qs, that is continuously subtracting B's from A. Okay, so as I said, we are trying to catch hold of that number, the smallest positive number in this set. That is what we are trying to look at. Now, there are two possible cases. One is if A is less than B. Can someone tell me what will be the remainder if A is less than B? Someone can please switch on your mic and tell me what you think the remainder will be if A is less than B. What will be the remainder in the quotient if A is less than B? These are both positive integers. Can someone tell me? Just switch on your mic and tell me what is the remainder and quotient if A is less than B. Try to express A as some BQ plus R. What will be your Q and R? Remember that you need R to lie between 0 and B. What do you think it will be? What will be your remainder and what will be your quotient? Okay, Ankit is saying, by the way, I can't see your chats when I'm on my screen, so you will need to put on your mic and talk. Is Ankit saying that I can't understand? Q is 0 and R is A. Ankit, can you please put on your mic and tell me what you're saying?
Yes, sir. Q as quotient is 0, remainder will be the same.
That's right.
A itself.
Fine, that is right. So, I hope everyone can see that. If A is less than B, then you can write A as B times 0 plus A itself. So, and we know that A lies between 0 and B, since A is less than B. So, therefore, this is a valid expression. So, the existence is proved in this case when A is less than B. So, all we've got to consider is the case when, this is a very trivial case. So, the case when A is strictly greater than B, or greater than or equal to B, say. Again, the case when A is equal to B is very easy. I hope everyone can see that also. Can someone tell me what will be the quotient and remainder when A is equal to B? I can't see your chats, by the way, because I'm on this screen. Can someone switch on the mic and tell me what is the quotient and remainder when A is equal to B?
Quotient will be 1 and remainder will be 0.
That's right. Thank you. So the quotient is going to be 1 and your remainder will be 0 in this case. So this is also a very simple case. So we are done with this case and done with that case. The only thing we need to consider is when A is greater than B. So when A is greater than B, let's look at the set S, which we have defined over here. That is the set of all A minus BQ Okay, let's look at only positives a minus bq such that q is a natural number. I don't even need to take 0. If I want, I can. That's fine. Okay, so in this case, you can see, let me, yes. Okay, so n equals n union 0. That's fine. So S is a minus bq greater than or equal to 0, because you might get a remainder 0, such that q is in n union 0. Okay, let's try to prove that this set is non-empty. Can someone tell me, give me an element in this set? That means I want some expression a minus bq, where q is in n union 0, that lies inside this S. That is, that a minus bq should be greater than or equal to 0. Can someone tell me what value of q will make a minus bq to lie inside S? See, this here is a subset of the set of whole numbers, that is n union 0. Okay, so if I prove that this has a that this is non-empty, then it will have a least element. Can someone give me an element that lies inside S? One simple element that lies inside S?
A itself, sir.
Why?
Because if you take A minus beta, A minus B times 0,
Oh,
we get
that's it.
that, that is in
Correct.
that set.
Okay. Thank you, Simran. Okay. So, Simran said that A itself lies inside S, because if you take Q as 0, it satisfies this relation, and it will be positive since A is a positive number, right? So we know that A lies inside S, so that makes S non-empty. Okay, and if S is non-empty by the well ordering principle, which also works in n union 0, it has a least element. Let's call that least element of S as R. Okay, so the least element of S we will call as R. Okay, and this least element is going to have some expression of the type a minus bq. So R will be some a minus b times q. Okay, and since R is a minus b times q, we can write A as bq plus R. Okay, but notice here this does not yet prove existence. That is because I have not yet shown that R lies between 0 and b. If I show that R lies between 0 and b, then I have shown existence. So let us see what happens if R is greater than b. Can someone tell me what will happen if R is greater than b? What will be the contradiction? What will happen if R is greater than b? See, your R here is some number of the form a minus bq. What happens if this b, a minus bq, this q is fixed now, is strictly greater than b, or is greater than or equal to b also? What happens if this takes place? So if this takes place, okay, let me go forward, otherwise we will not be able to move. If a minus bq is greater than or equal to b, I can shift b to the other side and I will get a minus b times q plus 1 is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, which means that this A minus B times Q plus 1 will belong to S. Correct? So that is your R minus B will be inside S. Is this a contradiction? Can someone tell me why this is a contradiction? See, this expression here, what you can see is of the same form, this form here, A minus BQ form. Can someone tell me what is the contradiction, why R minus B cannot be in S? Why is this a contradiction? What is R to S? What is R? So you can see here, R is the least element, right? R is the least element of S, and we are saying that R minus B is in S, and definitely R minus B is a number less than S, less than R itself, right? But R is the least element of S. That's a contradiction. The least element of S has to be the smallest element that lies inside S, right? So this is that R, what you get is by continuous subtraction till the smallest positive integer. That positive integer, that smallest positive integer that you get is R. Okay. So example, let me just give you an idea here. This is not very difficult. It's say we take some two small numbers, say 15. Say we take A as 15 and B as 2. You keep subtracting. What is A minus B? It is 13. What is A minus 2B? We will get 11. A minus 3B. We get 9. A minus 4B. Keep subtracting 2 from it. So what are you going to get? A minus 4B will be 7. A minus 5B is 5. A minus 6B is 3. A minus 7B is 1. So you can see what happens here. This is now the smallest positive number that I can achieve. If I go one more step, A minus 8B, I'm going to get a negative number. So I stop here. So you can see this is what my remainder will be. When I divide A by B, your remainder is going to be 1, right? Everyone should know this. When you divide 15 by 2, your remainder is 1. That's what division is. You keep subtracting till you get the smallest positive number. That is your remainder. And the number of times that you have subtracted, that is in this case 7, is the quotient. Okay, that's exactly what division is. Okay. So if you go one more step also, this is exactly going that next step. You're taking that R and you're subtracting by B again. It should not remain positive because I have done it till the last positive stage. Okay. So since R minus B is less than R, this is a contradiction, and therefore we know that this statement here is false, which means that the negation is true. That is, R has to be less than B. And by definition of the set S, R is definitely greater than or equal to 0. Every element of S is positive. So you can see, I'm sorry that I have done so much of scribbling around. I hope it is understandable. Okay, so R is greater than or equal to B. So we have got existence. Okay, we have managed to write this A as some BQ plus R. So we know existence. What is left to prove is only the uniqueness of the theorem. Okay, and that is pretty simple. So how do I get uniqueness? Suppose I can write A as some B times Q1 plus R1, and I can also write A as B times Q2 plus R2, where say R1 and R2 are less than B. Okay. Now notice here that if R1 is equal to R2, if R1 is equal to R2, then we will get BQ1 is equal to BQ2. And since B is non-zero, we'll get Q1 is equal to Q2. So that will prove it. Right? If R1 is equal to R2, then BQ1 will be equal to BQ2, which will mean that Q1 is equal to Q2. So we only need to check, we need to basically prove that R1 is equal to R2. So what happens, suppose R1 is not equal to R2. Okay. So if R1 is not equal to R2, then what we get is, just by equating both of these, since we have A's on both sides, we have B times Q1, this is one way of doing it, plus R1 is equal to B times Q2 plus R2, and taking this on that side and taking R1 on that side, we will get B times, so I'm taking this on this side and I'm taking R1 on that side, and then I'm taking the modulus. So I will get B times Q1 minus Q2 equals mod of R2 minus R1, which is essentially the mod of R1 minus R2 itself. You can work this out. You just take those on that side and then take the modulus throughout, you will get this. So basically, if I either prove that Q1 is equal to Q2, or if I prove that Q1 is equal to Q2, this will tell me that mod of R1 minus R2 is 0, which means that R1 is equal to R2. And if I prove that R1 is equal to R2, then using the previous argument, I can get that. So that's what I need to prove. I just need to either prove that Q1 is equal to Q2 or R1 is equal to R2. Okay. Now, what will happen if Q1 is not equal to Q2? If Q1 is not equal to Q2, then the modulus of Q1 minus Q2, okay, is going to be greater than or equal to 1. Q1 is not equal to Q2. See, don't try to write all of this because you already have your notes. Okay. So if Q1 is not equal to Q2, then the modulus of this, because they are both integers, will be greater than or equal to 1, which will mean that the modulus of R1 minus R2 will be greater than or equal to B. Right? This is from here you can see that. And this is definitely a contradiction, because we know that R1 and R2 lies between 0 and B. Okay, I can write down the proof fast. Actually, I would like to leave it out. But so 0 is less than or equal to R1, which is strictly less than B. And you also know that 0 is less than or equal to R2, strictly less than B. I can multiply by minus on both sides of the second equation to get minus B is strictly less than minus R2 less than or equal to 0. Now adding here these two, I'll get minus B is strictly less than, there's a less than or equal to and a less than here. So when I add, I will get strictly less than R1 minus R2, which is strictly less than B again. Again, the same idea, which tells me, you can see that this number here lies between minus B and plus B, which means that its modulus should be strictly less than B. Now look at the sign here and look at the sign there. You see that we have a contradiction. So that contradicts the fact that Q1 is not equal to Q2. And since it contradicts the fact that Q1 is not equal to Q2, this means that Q1 is equal to Q2. And if q1 is equal to q2, substitute in this equation here. On the left you will get 0, which means that the right hand side will be 0, which means that R1 will be equal to R2. Okay, so this is your division algorithm. Please try to write this proof out on your own without looking at your notes. Okay, it is not very difficult. All you need to do is prove existence and uniqueness. For the existence, you need to use the well ordering principle, and for uniqueness, that's the manipulation you need to use. Okay, let's go to the next part. Okay, so we say that the integer d divides the integer n if we can express n as some c times d. Can someone tell me what is the time? Okay, that's 10:06. So we have 10. Okay, so if I can write n as some c times d, then I say that d divides n. The common notation for this is d slash n. Okay, so this is not d upon n. For d upon n, you would write the slash on that side. It's not this, but it is d slash n. Sometimes you even use the straight line. Okay, so just be careful with this notation. Try not to write this, because that means something a little different. Okay, so we say that d divides n if I can express n as some c times d. It is easy here to observe that when divided by d, so n, so d divides n if and only if the remainder when d divides n in your division algorithm is 0. Okay, that is if and only if your remainder is 0. That can be easily observed because this is one of the expressions. You can write n as cd plus 0, which is a valid expression for division algorithm. And also if you start with division algorithm with remainder 0, you see what you get is, you get some n is equal to some qd plus some 0, because the remainder is 0, which means that d divides n. So d divides n essentially means that in the division algorithm your remainder is 0. Is that okay? Okay, so let's move forward. Okay, so there are some basic properties of division. Just another point here. There are some books, that is, one is Burton, which does not allow for d to be 0. Okay, it tells you that we can't divide by 0. So in Apostle, which is the book which we are following for this course, we allow for d to be 0. So just a point to note here. Okay, sometimes in some cases we don't allow for d to be 0, but in this case we are allowing for d to be 0. Okay, so these are the properties of divisibility. I think all of you all can prove all of them. Okay, so let me just go over it. One is a number always divides itself. I think everyone can see this. The c in this case will be 1 itself. Okay. So 1 always divides n. That is because we can write n as, again, the same expression. So the c in this case is n, and here your c is 1. N always divides 0. Can someone tell me why n divides 0? Come on. I think 4 to 5 seconds if I allow you. You can tell me why n divides 0. I lost the students in the group? Oh, y'all are still here. Can someone tell me why n divides 0? I will unmute you all now. Rachana, can you please tell me why n divides 0?
Hello, sir.
Yeah, please tell me.
0 can be written as 0 plus n times 0.
Okay, thank you. And can you also tell me why if 0 divides n, then n has to be 0. So Archana said that 0 is equal to n times 0. So you can see that your C here is 0 and therefore n divides 0. Can you tell me why if 0 divides n, then n has to be 0? What is the meaning of 0 divides n? That means there is some C
Is
such
such that
n is equal to
n can be written as n plus 0 times c.
C times 0, right? If 0 divides n, there is some C such that n is equal to C times 0. But what does
To
this
c
mean?
times 0.
C times 0 we know is 0, so therefore n has to be 0. So these are quite simple things. I think I should actually skip them. Should I skip them or can I? Archana, can you tell me if I should skip them or we should give them fast proofs? Archana?
So,
Should we skip them or we should give fast proofs for them?
yeah, so you can give fast.
Okay, fine. Then we'll give fast proofs for them. Okay, so if d divides n and n divides m, then what we know is since d divides n, we can write n as some c1 times d, and as m divides, what is that? N divides m. I think, okay, that's fine. Since n divides m, that's fine. I can write m as, say, some c2 times n, and now I can just take this here and substitute it inside here to get m is equal to c1 c2 times d, and this tells me that d divides m. Okay, and we can just do this for all the different properties. Again, if d divides n and d divides m, then d will divide any an plus bm. This is also easy. So d divides n means we can write n as some c1 times d, and since d divides m, we can write m as some c2 times d. Okay, let's check what is an plus bm. That will be an plus bm will be d times a times c1 plus b times c2. Here again, now you have an integer multiple of d equals an plus bm, which means that d divides an plus bm. Okay, so these are quite simple. I think we could leave them. Again, a few here. I think you all should work these out on your own. They are not very difficult. I think this is quite easy. If d divides n, then any multiple of, then a times d will divide a times n. And if ad divides an and a is non-zero, then d divides n. This is also simple. This will mean that an is equal to some c times ad, and since a is non-zero, we can cancel it out here, and this tells us that d divides n. So these are quite easy. I think we can leave them out. Let's go to the these few you can pay attention to. The proofs are anyway done, so you could look at them. I'm sure you don't need to. These are quite simple to prove. Let's just look at this one here. Okay, I just like this. It's a very simple fact, but it's nice to know. So if d divides n, okay, d divides n, it means that n is equal to some c times d. Now notice that this c here is also a divisor of n, because I can write n as d times c. Okay, and this c here is equal to n upon d. Okay, this n upon d is called as the complementary divisor of d. Okay, let me just show you what happens when I look at all divisors of a number. Say I look at the divisors of 20. So the first divisor is 1, 2, 3 is not a divisor, 4 is a divisor, 5 is a divisor, 10 is a divisor, and 20 is a divisor. I hope I have not missed out anything. Yeah, that seems right. Now look at this 1 here. This 1, the complementary divisor of this is 20 upon 1. And you can see that's the last number. The complementary divisor of 2 is 20 upon 2, which is 10. The complementary divisor of this is 20 upon 4, which is 5. The complementary divisor of this 20 upon 5, which is 4, and I can do this 20 upon 10, which is 2, and this is the complementary divisor. This is 20 upon 20, which is 1. Can someone observe and tell me what has happened to the numbers? Can you tell me what has happened to the numbers? Here you had divisors 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 4, 5, 10, 20, and now you have 20, 10, 5, 4, 2, 1. What has happened? What has happened to the direction of them? Okay, so you can see here that this direction has gone in the opposite direction. Okay, you can keep this in mind. So if you draw a line here right in the middle, halfway through, you see that the other half can be just obtained from the complementary divisors, and this is true in general. It is very easy to prove it. What you will also notice is this first half of the numbers are much smaller compared to those as you go to bigger numbers. Okay, so anyway, I will leave that out for you. You can take a few numbers and check. Okay, so what is the meaning of greatest common divisor? So there are multiple ways of defining the greatest common divisor. This is the way the book proceeds, so we will do it this way. I don't really like doing it in this manner. Okay, so an integer d is said to be the greatest common divisor, a positive integer d. Yeah, is said to be a greatest common divisor of a and b if firstly it is greater than or equal to 0. We will see why this equal to 0 has come, which you might not see in the basic course in number theory if you have followed Burton. D divides both of the integers, and given any other integer which is a common divisor of a and b, D divides E. Okay, so now this is the definition used. There is another definition also used, that is 1. D is greater than or equal to 0, that has a small problem when D is 0 though. So let's not look at that and go to it as we come. Okay, so you might have seen another definition which is equivalent to this. Let's keep that aside for now. So this is the greatest common divisor. Okay, so yeah, so given any other common divisor, I think I have made an error. Oh, I think this is a mistake here. This should be E divides D if I'm not mistaken, correct? That's right. Okay, I'm sorry, this is a mistake. It will be a mistake on your notes also. This should not be D divides E. This is E divides D. Okay, D is greater than any other common divisor. So E divides D. Okay, so there is a nice expression which you have for the GCD of two integers. By the way, when can D be 0? When will D be 0? Can someone switch on your mic and tell me when will D be 0? For what conditions of A and B can D be 0? Can someone tell me for what conditions of A and B will D be 0?
If either of A or B is 0.
Are you sure? If A is non-zero and B is 0, in that case, what will be the greatest common divisor? Yes. What's the greatest common divisor in that case? Yes, Sumedha?
It's A.
That's right. It would be modulus of A, in fact. If A is negative, it would be modulus of A. So D can only be 0 in one case, that is if A and B are both 0. Okay, only in this particular case you are going to get D is 0. Okay, that can be easily observed, in fact. Okay, in fact you can just prove it out fast if you like. Suppose, say, A is not 0 and B is also not 0, then what will happen? Anyway, this will be taken care in the next theorem. So, okay, so okay, so there is a nice expression which we can have for the GCD, that is the GCD of two numbers is always a linear combination of the two numbers. Okay, and in fact it is, yeah, so it is the linear combination of two numbers. So to prove this fact, it is very easy, this proof. Okay, all you have to do is look at all possible linear combinations. Say you take S to be the set of all AU plus BV such that let's take it greater than or equal to 0, such that U and V are in Z. Okay, so there is one obvious element in S. Okay, I think I need to be a little careful here. Okay, yes. So if D is 0, I need to have to prove that A and B are both 0. Can someone tell me why that is true? If D is 0, why should A and B both be 0? Look at the second property. What does it tell you? So if D is 0, that means 0 divides A and 0 divides B. But we have seen in previous properties, I can go back and show you here itself. Where is that? Here. If 0 divides n, then n has to be 0. So that tells us that A will have to be 0 and B also will have to be 0. So if A and B, if the common divisor of A and B is 0, the greatest common divisor is 0, that means by the second property here, 0 will divide A and 0 will divide B, which will have to mean that A is 0 and B is 0. So D is equal to 0 always means that A is equal to 0 and B is equal to 0. That's the only time when you have the GCD is 0. Only if A is equal to 0 and B is equal to 0. So if the contrapositive to this statement is what we were trying to prove earlier. If A is not 0 or B is not 0, then D will not be 0. Okay, D will have to be strictly greater than 0. So let's look at this proof in two parts. One is the obvious part, that is if D is 0, let's not say if D is 0, yes, if both A and B are 0, so A is equal to 0 and B is equal to 0. In this case, the GCD, let me just write GCD of A and B as D, just for short so that I don't have to keep writing GCD. In this case, we know we can write D as 0 times whatever you like, but anyway, if A is 0 and B is 0, then D will have to be 0. Okay, I hope you can all prove this, why D will have to be 0. That is because, what are the things that I need to prove? I need to prove that 0 is greater than or equal to 0, which is true. I need to prove that 0 divides A and 0 divides B, which is again true because A and B are both 0 and 0 divides 0. In our definition, 0 divides 0. Okay. Now, if E is any integer such that E divides A and E divides B, so say E is an integer such that E divides A and E divides B, you don't really have to worry because since D is 0, 0 divides any integer, so 0 will divide E. So you can see that all these three properties are satisfied. Just a small pointer I should put up here. Prove this as your homework. This is a very simple fact, but prove this as your homework. The GCD of two numbers A and B, GCD of two integers A and B, this is always going to be unique. Okay, this is going to be unique. Please don't look at the notes and prove, please do it on your own. Okay, so if A and B are 0, then D is equal to 0, which means that I can write 0 as, we know this is very easy, 0 times 1 plus 0 times 1. So this expression here is possible. So that case is a simple case. So this is done. Now let us assume that either A is not equal to 0 or B is not equal to 0. Okay, and here we can see that we can, without loss of generality, we could just assume that A is not 0. Okay, so without loss of generality, we can assume that, to make our proof easier, we can assume that A is not 0. Now, if A is not 0, can someone give me an element inside S? one element inside S. I want to prove that S is non-empty. Can someone give me one element in S if A is non-zero? What can you take U as and what can you take B as to get a positive integer?
U is equal to A and V is equal to 0.
So what do you get when U is equal to A and V is equal to 0? What is AU plus BV?
A square.
Thank you. Yeah, that's absolutely right. If you take U as A, this is one way of doing it. There are multiple other options also. Thank you, Mukta. So if you take U as A and V as 0, then AU plus BV, AU plus BV AU plus BV will be A square, which will have to be a positive number. Okay, so since A is non-zero, this is going to be positive. Another option which you also have is, in fact, mod of A is going to lie inside S. You can see it in two different cases. If A is positive, then A is going to be in S, and if A is negative, then A times minus 1 plus B times 0, which is mod of A itself, is going to be in S. Okay, so in any case, we know that S is non-empty. The moment S is non-empty, we know that it has a least element. Let's say the least element in S is AX plus BY. Okay, so the least element in S, unfortunately I have not kept an extra page, so I'll have to wipe this, like how I wipe the board. Anyway, so this has a least element. Say the least element is AX plus BY. So yes, so I want to prove that this is the GCD of A and B. To prove that this is the GCD of A and B, I need to prove that this AX plus BY divides A and AX plus BY divides B. So let's call this here as D. What are the things I need to prove? One is I need to prove that D is greater than or equal to 0. D is greater than or equal to 0 by definition of S. In fact, D is strictly greater than 0. Secondly, I need to prove that D divides A and D divides B. And thirdly, let me do the third one first because the third one is easier. I want to prove that if E divides A and E divides B, then E divides D. But this we know, because if E divides A and E divides B, then E divides AX plus BY, which means that E will divide D. Now let's prove that D divides A and D divides B. I will just prove that D divides A, D divides B is a similar argument. So to prove that D divides A, let's use division algorithm. By division algorithm, okay, I can write A as some DQ plus R. So I basically want to show that this R here is 0. What will happen if R is strictly greater than 0? Okay, what will happen if this R is strictly greater than 0? So if R is strictly greater than 0, yes. Okay, so what happens if R is strictly greater than 0? So if I want to prove it's 0, so I am trying to go by contradiction. What happens if R is strictly greater than 0? This will mean that substitute in place of B, you will get A is equal to AX plus BY times BY times Q plus R, which means that R here is going to be equal to, take this on that side, so you'll get A times 1 minus x cube, I hope I'm not making any errors, plus B times minus y. And you can see that this is of the form ax plus by, and also we know that R is positive. In fact, R lies between 0 and D. So since it's strictly greater than 0, we know that R lies between 0 and D. So this means that R is going to be inside that set which we had taken S. But this is a contradiction, because D is the least element. D is the least element of S, which means that, and R is strictly less than D. This is definitely a contradiction, right? This is a contradiction because D is the least element of S and R is an element which is less than D. So that is a contradiction, which means that R has to be equal to 0. And if R has to be equal to 0, we get 0 here, and that tells us that A is equal to B times Q, which means that D divides Q. Okay, similarly you can prove that B also divides, that D also divides B. Okay, a similar argument, you will get that B divides D. You just need to take two different cases for B, when B is 0 and B is non-zero. Other than that, the argument is the same. You need, by the way, I am using the generalized form of division algorithm, though I have only proved the other form. The proof of that is on your is in your notes. Okay, this is called as Euclid's lemma. Okay, this is a very interesting fact, and we use this very, very often. So if A divides BC and the GCD of A and B is 1, that is, see, when the GCD of two elements is 1, we say that they are relatively prime. That means they have no divisors common except for 1. Okay, that's what you can see. So if A divides BC and the GCD of A and B is 1, then A will have to divide C. The proof of this is very simple. Since the GCD of A and B is 1, you can write 1 as some AX plus BY, say BY. Okay, so I want to prove that A divides BC. So what do I need to do? I can multiply throughout by BC. If I multiply throughout by BC, I will get BC is equal to, I hope I'm right. Yes, BC. Sorry, I don't multiply throughout by BC, I multiply throughout by C. So multiply throughout by C, I will get C is equal to ACX plus BCY. Now what can you see here? You can see that A divides this term, and also you can see since A divides BC, A divides this term. Since A divides both these terms, A divides any linear combination of these terms, so which means that A will have to divide C. It's a very simple proof, okay, called as Euclid's lemma. Keep note of this fact. This is used very often. You don't have to memorize these things. They are quite natural. Okay, so this is the one which I was talking about earlier. This is generally what is given as the definition of GCD. Burton at least gives it in this way. I have bolded this here. This definition only works when both A and B are non-zero, not both of which are 0. That is, either A is non-zero, or B is non-zero. Okay, I will leave this out as a homework to you. It is not there in your notes also. I am purposely leaving it out. It's not very difficult. you need to use only two results. One is the definition and the other one is this theorem here. Okay, please try to prove it. If you have any problem, you can ask me. Don't look in books for the proof. Try to do it on your own. Okay, this here is called as, this is a very important result in fact. Okay, I'll give a fast proof to this and that's the end of the session. So this proof here is very easy. If A is equal to BQ plus R, then the GCD of A and R is the same as the GCD of B and R. And this comes out to be very useful for computing the GCD of two numbers. Okay, this method which is used here is called as the Euclid's algorithm for computing GCD of A and B. Okay, so let's prove it first. It's very simple. Suppose we take D to be the GCD of, say D1 is the GCD of A and B, and say D2 is the GCD of B and R. Okay, the idea of this proof is I will prove that D1 divides D2 and D2 divides D1. I'm giving the basic idea of this proof. What is the meaning of D1 is the GCD of A and B? Since D1 is the GCD of A and B, okay, so D1 is GCD of A and B, we will have D1 divides A and D1 divides B. Look over here, if D1 divides A and D1 divides B, this will mean that D1 divides any linear combination of A and B, so that one of the linear combinations is A minus Q times B, which is R. So this tells me that D1 divides R, and therefore D1 is a common divisor of B and R. But D2 is the GCD of B and R. So any common divisor has to be less than it. Or in other words, D2 has to divide D1. I'm sorry, it's the other way around. This is the biggest common divisor of B and R. This is one of the common divisors. So which means that D1 has to divide D2. The other side of the argument is as easy, or if not easier. D2 is a GCD of B and R. So therefore by the second property again, D2 will divide B and D2 will divide R. And therefore D2 will divide any linear combination, which means that D2 will divide BQ plus R. What is BQ plus R? It is A. So this tells us that D2 is a common divisor of A and B, and D2 is a common divisor of A and B, and this here is the greatest common divisor, which means that D2 will have to divide D1, and since D1 and D2 are positive and one divides the other on both sides, so you will get D1 is equal to D2. Okay, let me just tell you how this can be used to get the GCD of two numbers. Okay, so what you do is, it's a very simple idea. If you can write, if you want to find the GCD of B and A and B, you write A as some BQ plus R1, say B1 Q1B plus R1. We can always do this using division algorithm. Now computing the GCD of this is the same as computing the GCD of this. So what you can do is now write B as, divide B by R1. So B will be R1 times some Q2, little bit notations. Let's write it as Q2 times R1 plus R2. So now the GCD of A and B is the same as the GCD of B and R, but the GCD of B and R1 is the same as the GCD of R1 and R2, Okay, so you can keep doing this, and so let's now divide R1 by R2. So R1 is equal to Q3 times R2 plus R3, and you can keep doing this. There is a fact that will assert that at some stage this remainder here is going to become 0. Okay, I'll tell you why it becomes 0. First, let us write the stage, that is, say Rn minus 1 will be Q, so let's say Rn is equal to Qn plus 1 times Rn, okay, it's Rn is equal to Qn plus 2 times Rn plus 1 plus 0. So this tells us, by this theorem here, what this tells us? It tells us that the GCD of Rn and Rn plus 1 is the same as the GCD of Rn plus 1 and 0. But the GCD of Rn plus 1 and 0 is Rn plus 1, right? The GCD of any number in 0 is the number itself, or modulus of the number. So this will give us the GCD. If we keep doing this and catch hold of the final last remainder, that will give us the GCD. Okay, so that's how we catch hold of the GCD of that's how we catch hold of the GCD of two numbers. Now, I said I will tell you why this will end at some stage. This will end at some stage because by division algorithm, hello? Okay. So we know that by division algorithm, R1 will be strictly less than B. And we know that R2 will be strictly less than R1, and so on. So it has to at some stage become 0. Okay, so that proves the Euclid's algorithm. This is called as Euclid's algorithm. Okay, so you can go over it again if you have not got it, or you can ask me. That's it. Okay, let me just switch the screen.